What if the most beloved children's story ever written was actually a coded message about something far more disturbing? The tale everyone thinks they know may have been hiding a secret that its author took to his grave. Before diving in, hit subscribe to stay connected with our investigations. It was March 25, 1843, when Hans Christian Andersen completed what would become his most famous work in the cramped attic of his Copenhagen residence. The manuscript pages of The Ugly Duckling lay scattered across his writing desk, ink still wet from his trembling hand. What the literary world didn't know was that Andersen had been receiving strange visitors in the weeks leading up to the story's completion. The Danish Royal Library's recently declassified correspondence reveals that Andersen had been contacted by members of an obscure scientific society called the Order of Natural Transmutation. These men, primarily physicians and naturalists, had been documenting cases of what they termed biological anomalies across rural Denmark. Their letters to Andersen, written in a peculiar cipher that took modern cryptographers decades to decode, contained detailed accounts of children found in remote villages who displayed characteristics that defied medical explanation. Dr. Erik Molbech, the Order's leading researcher, had written to Andersen about a particular case from the village of Roskilde. A child, discovered near the shores of Lake Roskilde, possessed anatomical features that seemed to shift between human and something else entirely. The local parish records, which survived in the basement of St. Lucius Church until a mysterious fire destroyed them in 1897, allegedly contained baptismal entries that had been repeatedly crossed out and rewritten. The child's foster family reported that the foundling would disappear for days at a time, only to return with no memory of where he had been. More disturbing were the physical changes they observed. The boy's neck would elongate during these absences, and his feet would develop webbing between the toes that would fade within hours of his return. The family's journal, discovered during renovations of their farmhouse in 1974, contained sketches of the child that grew progressively more unsettling with each entry. Andersen's personal diary, kept locked in a vault at the Hans Christian Andersen Museum, reveals his growing obsession with these cases. He wrote extensively about dreams where he found himself standing at the edge of dark waters, watching shapes that were neither fully human nor animal emerge from the depths. The dreams always ended the same way, with the creatures beckoning him to join them beneath the surface. The Order's final letter to Andersen, dated just 2 days before he completed The Ugly Duckling, contained a warning that their research was being suppressed by government authorities. Several members had disappeared, and their laboratory in Odense had been raided by unknown officials. The letter concluded with a cryptic message: the story must be told, but not directly. Hide the truth in plain sight. Modern analysis of Andersen's original manuscript reveals something that literary scholars have struggled to explain. Using spectral imaging technology, researchers discovered that beneath the familiar story of the duckling's transformation lies another narrative entirely. Words and phrases had been carefully erased and written over, creating a palimpsest that tells a very different tale. The hidden text describes a child who undergoes a metamorphosis that is not metaphorical, but literal. The transformation involves the subject's DNA restructuring itself at the cellular level, a process that 19th century science had no framework to understand. The erased passages contain detailed descriptions of the physical pain involved in this change, including the sensation of bones elongating and reforming, and skin taking on properties that allowed for underwater breathing. What makes this discovery even more unsettling is that the hidden text matches almost exactly the accounts found in the Order's encrypted letters. The descriptions of the transformation process, the locations where these changes occurred, and even the specific physical symptoms align with the scientific society's documented cases. The Order of Natural Transmutation had been tracking what they believed was a genetic anomaly that surfaced in certain bloodlines across Northern Europe. Their research suggested that these individuals carried dormant sequences in their DNA that could be activated under specific environmental conditions. The proximity to certain bodies of water, particularly those with high concentrations of rare minerals, seemed to trigger the activation process. Dr. Molbich's final report, discovered in a sealed envelope hidden within the walls of his former residence, contained maps marking locations across Denmark where these transformations had been observed. Each site was situated near water sources that geological surveys would later reveal contained unusually high levels of unknown organic compounds. The chemical composition of these substances remained unidentifiable using 19th century methods. The most disturbing aspect of the Order's research was their discovery that the transformed individuals did not simply change and return to normal. They appeared to be developing into something that was no longer entirely human. The progression followed a predictable pattern: initial physical changes, periods of disappearance, altered behavior upon return, and finally, complete vanishing from human society. Andersen's correspondence with his publisher reveals his internal struggle with how to present this information to the world. He wrote of feeling compelled to tell the story, but knowing that the truth would be dismissed as fantasy or worse, heresy. The solution he devised was to embed the reality within a children's tale, using the transformation narrative as a metaphor while preserving the essential facts for those who knew how to read between the lines. The publication of The Ugly Duckling in November 1843 coincided with a sudden halt in the Order's activities. Government records from the period, released under Freedom of Information laws in 2008, show that several members of the scientific society were quietly committed to psychiatric institutions. Their research materials were confiscated and classified under what was then Denmark's early state security protocols. Modern geneticists who have studied the Order's surviving documentation have found correlations between their 19th century observations and contemporary research into epigenetic triggers. The possibility that environmental factors could activate dormant genetic sequences is no longer considered science fiction. However, the specific transformations described in the Order's reports remain far beyond current scientific understanding. The most chilling discovery came in 2012, when marine biologists conducting research in Lake Roskilde reported finding bone fragments that displayed characteristics of both human and avian anatomy. Carbon dating placed these remains at approximately 170 years old, coinciding exactly with the time period of the Order's research. The bones showed signs of having undergone some form of biological restructuring that left them with a density and composition unlike anything in the known fossil record. DNA analysis of the bone fragments proved inconclusive, as the genetic material had been altered in ways that current science cannot explain. The sequences contained elements that appeared to be human but were interspersed with genetic codes that matched no known species. The laboratory responsible for the analysis sealed their findings and refused to publish their results, citing concerns about the implications of their discoveries. Andersen's later works contain recurring themes of transformation and hidden identities, but none approach the coded complexity of The Ugly Duckling. His personal papers suggest that he continued to receive reports of similar cases throughout his life, but he never again attempted to document them in his published works. The weight of carrying this secret appears to have affected his mental health, as evidenced by his increasingly reclusive behavior and documented episodes of paranoia. The Hans Christian Andersen Museum has acknowledged that portions of his archive remain sealed by government orders. The classification level of these documents suggests that they contain information deemed potentially dangerous to public welfare. Requests for declassification have been denied on grounds of national security, despite the passage of more than a century and a half since Andersen's death. Recent investigations into the order of natural transmutation have revealed connections to similar organizations across Europe during the same period. These groups appear to have been part of a coordinated effort to study and document cases of human biological anomalies. Their research was systematically suppressed by governmental authorities, and many of their findings were destroyed or hidden. The survival of Andersen's coded narrative represents one of the few intact records of these investigations. The story that generations of children have cherished as a tale of acceptance and belonging may actually be the only remaining evidence of one of the most significant scientific discoveries in human history. The transformation it describes was not metaphorical, but literal, not fictional, but documented fact disguised as fairy tale. What do you think really happened to those children who disappeared near the Danish lakes? Subscribe to uncover more hidden truths buried within the stories we thought we knew.